right, guys, so section 8.4 is on rational expressions. To know what a rational expression is, first let's talk about rational numbers. Anybody remember what a rational number is?
A number that ends positive.
It is a terminating decimal, or a repeating decimal, or, well, a whole number is rational, yes. George? Go right ahead. Okay, rational numbers, basically it's any number that can be written as a fraction. Okay, and those numbers include the terminating decimals, the repeating decimals. Whole numbers can be written as fractions. All of those are types of rational numbers. But just real basic, short and simple, if you can write it as a fraction, it's rational. So then when we're talking about a rational expression, this is a fraction that contains algebraic expressions. So it's algebraic expressions written as fractions. And then the last thing says that rational expressions must be written in simplest form. Well, what does that mean? That means that any like factors on the top and the bottom must be canceled. All right, so now we're going to look at one that is going to help us with simplest form as well as excluded or restricted values. Sometimes your book will say excluded values. Sometimes it will say restricted values. And basically that's just saying what number is X not allowed to equal. So if we take a look at this problem here, can anybody tell me what X can't equal? Okay, why couldn't X be 0? I mean, if I plug in a 0 here, I'm going to get 3 times negative 3, plug in a 0 here, it's 2 times negative 3. I can do that and end up with negative 9 over negative 6 and reduce it. I can put in a 0. What was that? Nothing. Isn't that the same as 0?
No.
Oh, are you saying it can equal everything? Okay. Okay, Brady, why do you say 3?
You can't divide by 0.
You can't divide by 0. Take a look. If you plug in a 3 here, 3 minus 3 is 0, times 2 is 0. So you're doing something divided by 0, and you can't divide by 0. Basically, you're not allowed to have a 0 on the bottom of a fraction. Okay, so what you're going to do to figure out the excluded values is you're going to take whatever factors are on the bottom and you're going to say those factors cannot equal 0. Well, does 2 ever equal 0? No, so I don't really have to worry about that part. But for this one, I'm going to go ahead and solve it to find out that X cannot equal 3. That's how you solve for it. Okay, and we just talked about why it can't be a 3. So 3 is an excluded or restricted value. And now, if I'm going to simplify this, I want to cancel any terms that are alike on the top and the bottom, and I cancel them in pairs. So I can cancel my x minus 3 on the top and the bottom, and I end up with 3 over 2 as my simplified form. And my x can't equal 3. That is my excluded or restricted value. I want to see if we can do this one at the bottom. Okay, here, I can't factor this. It's just a whole bunch of things multiplied together. It's already in factored form. So my factors, I've got a 15 times an x to the third. So those are my factors. So I have to say 15 cannot equal 0, x cannot equal 0, and y to the third cannot equal 0. Well, does 15 ever equal 0? No. So this is an excluded value. X can't be 0. What about my y cubed can't equal 0? What's the y? Allie, will you get the door, please? Y cannot be 0. So those are my restricted values. But now we've got to go back and simplify. So let's take this just a little part at a time. Start with the 5 over 15. What's that reduced to? 1/3, okay? Now, when you have x to the third over x, what does that simplify to? X squared, and it goes on the top. So now let's talk about the rule for exponents and a division problem. A shortcut way of doing this is take a look. X has the biggest exponent on the top. So my answer is going to be on the top. And then I just do the big exponent minus the little one. So 3 minus 1 gives me 2. For y, where is y going to end up at? On the bottom. And then I take the big exponent minus the little one, gives me a y squared on the bottom. And that is my simplified answer. Questions so far? All right, we've got one more we're going to do together, and then I've got a couple that you're going to do on your own. And then we're going to add to it just a little bit. Okay. So here's problem 1. They give me this rational expression. I want to know what is that in simplified form. State any restrictions on the variable. Well, here's the 3 steps we're going to follow. So once you get it copied down, go ahead and factor everything. Once you get it factored, I want you to check your factoring with mine. That'll be up front in just a minute. And then do the restricted values, and then we'll cancel. All right, so go ahead and check your factoring with mine, see how you did. If you have questions, let me know. Okay. So, did you factor the top correctly, or do we need to talk about that part? Okay. All I want to do is look at the top part. X squared plus 7x plus 10. My 2 parentheses, x starts each one. Then these 2 numbers have to multiply to be 10 and add to be 7. So that's where the 5 and the 2 came from. On the bottom, again, I start with x in each parenthesis. Then these 2 numbers have to multiply to be negative 10, so I've got to have opposite signs. They've got to add to be a negative 3. So I start out with a 5 and the 2. The 5 has to be negative because it's bigger, and my middle term is negative. Okay. So once you get it factored correctly, you're going to set, yeah, Eugene?
Is the top with x squared plus, is that plus 7x?
Yeah, is it hard to see in that yellow?
It's hard to see from back here.
All right, so once you've got it factored correctly, you want to take the factors that are on the bottom and say each of those factors cannot equal to 0 and solve them. So your restricted values are x cannot equal 5 and negative 2. Okay, step 3 says to cancel common factors top and bottom. So I have an x plus 2 on the top and I have an x plus 2 on the bottom. So all that's left is x plus 5 over x minus 5. Why can't I cancel those x's? It would be like these are in parentheses. X itself is not a factor. It's part of a binomial. Okay? If x is just multiplied by something, you could cancel those. But when it's added to something or subtracted with something, you can't cancel the x's. Okay? So my simplified answer is x plus 5 over x minus 5, and my excluded values are 5 and negative 2. That is your entire answer. Questions? Okay, do you see now why it was important that we review factoring? Because every one of these problems you're going to have to factor something before you can do the rest of it. All right, so here are 3 for you to try. Okay, I'm going to give you a few minutes and then I'll put my work up here. 2 of those are pretty straightforward. One of them, you got to think a little bit. You've got all the tools and everything you need to be able to do it, but you have to work a little bit harder at it. All right, so here's what I got for parts A and B. For part C, I've given you a hint as to where I think you should start. If you'll notice, the top of that fraction is not in standard form. What I did before I started is I rewrote it so that it was in standard form, making it easier to work with. Anybody have questions? Yeah.
Does it matter what order the numbers come in?
No.
All right.
Yeah.
Can you show how you got -4x?
Okay. What I did is I took 24 divided by -6, gave me -4. X to the third over x squared. Subtract your exponents, you're going to get x to the first, and it goes on the top of the fraction. And then my y to the thirds cancel. All right. Yeah, Eugene?
Why do you have y cannot equal 0?
Because it's one of the factors on the bottom. It's also a restricted value. Technically, I would have -6 can't equal 0 because it's a factor. That's never true. I also have x squared can't equal 0, which is where this came from. And then y to the third can't equal 0, which is where this came from. Okay. All right, everybody go ahead and try part C. Okay, well, there's the rest of part C.